Let's calculate the average of column C in cell C17. You can pause the video and do it yourself, or you can just keep watching the video. So double click equal sign, average. Once I have the correct formula, I can select it and press tab. And I want to get the average of the range cell C2 to cell C16. So C2 colon C16, sorry, C16. Okay, this is nothing new. We got the average, and we see that we got the average of the range C2 to C16. What if you want to use these numbers in your workbook in a bunch of other formulas? You can always refer to them as C2 to C16, but there is another way of referring to ranges. In Excel, we can give a name to ranges, and then we can refer to those ranges by their names. Let's click on the Formulas tab in the ribbon, and you see that we have the Defined Names command group. We can go to Define Name, so we can use the arrow, but we don't have to use the arrow actually for this. And then we can give a new name. Let's name it sold underscore items. We can choose a scope for the sold items, workbook sheet 1 or sheet 2. If we select workbook, it means that it doesn't matter how many sheets the Excel file has. In any sheet, if we refer to the sold items range, then we will always refer to these cells. However, if I select, for example, sheet 1, then it means that on sheet 2, if I refer to sold items, then it will not work, because it only works on sheet 1. But let's select workbook. We don't need to add any comments here, but we have to change the refer to, because now it's cell C17 on sheet 1. So let's click on this arrow. And we can just select the desired range, and Excel does the adjustment here automatically. So range now is cell C2 to cell C16 on sheet 1. Don't worry about the dollar signs. Later in the course we will discuss them more. I can actually just click on this arrow again, and then I'm back to the new name box. And everything looks good. So the name of my range will be sold items. The scope is workbook, so I can use it anywhere in this workbook. And the range itself is from cell C2 to cell C16 on sheet 1. Let's click on OK. Now let me delete this average formula. And let me redo it, but now with the named range. So equals average. And let me start typing sold. Oh, and it appears. While editing a formula, Excel searches for other formulas, because it might happen that you want to use a formula inside a formula. But now that we have this named range, we see that Excel also searches among the named ranges. So I can just double click this, and you see that this is in a sort of purplish color, and it even shows me what range this name refers to. I can just close the formula, press enter, and I will get the same result. Now in the formula bar, you don't see the exact range based on which we calculated the average, but you see the name of this range. So you see the named range. Let's check the name manager. The name manager shows you the named ranges you have. Now we have only one, the sold items range. And by the way, a range cannot have space in it. This is why I put the underscore between sold and items. Let's confirm this actually. So let's click on new, and let's say range space with space spaces. And let's click on OK. And yes, there is an error message. Excel tells us that the syntax of this name is incorrect, so the way we named it. Verify that the name starts with a letter or underscore, doesn't include a space or character that isn't allowed, doesn't conflict with an existing name in the workbook. I always use the letters from the English alphabet when naming my ranges actually, and those characters are all allowed. Now you should make sure that you use a name only once, so this is what this conflicting means. And make sure that your range starts with a letter or an underscore, and that there are no spaces in it. Now let's click on OK, and let's click on cancel. So now the name manager pops back up. We could also edit this range, but I don't want to edit it, so let's click on cancel. We could delete this range, but let's not delete it for now. In the refers to column you see to which range this name refers to, and actually you can see it here as well. You see the name of the range, the values in the range, and Excel processes the values in a so-called array. This is why you see the curly brackets and the semicolons. I can adjust the width of each column so I can see more of the values, of the underlying values. For now it's enough you know that an array is a way of storing data. Now we see the scope of the range, so we can use this range in the whole workbook, and we see that there is no comment. You can always put a comment here, like, for example, use this range for this and this calculation, so that your colleagues will have more info about the range. Now there is also this option to filter the names, so we can clear the filter, but we can show only the ranges that are scoped to a workbook, and this is scoped to a workbook. But if I select scope to worksheet, then the range disappears, but actually it was not deleted, it was just filtered out. So scope to workbook, and it reappears. We can check the names with errors or the names without errors. Now this range doesn't have any errors, so this should be fine. We can filter for defined names, and now this is a defined name, a so-called defined name. And we can also search for or filter for, table names. For now, what is important that we have this sold items range that we can use in the whole workbook. Let's check the name manager. So we still have our sold items range here, and it is scoped to workbook. Let's close this, and you see that in this formula we already used the sold items named range. Now let's confirm that the scope is good, so let's go to sheet 2. Let me just zoom in on this sheet as well. Okay, that should be enough. And let me type the same formula here. So it will be an average formula, and I will use the sold items range. You see that we have the same result as on sheet 1. So our sold items named range is scoped to the workbook. This has been confirmed. Now let's define an additional name to the sold items range, but let's scope it to sheet 1. So let's go to define name, and I will call this range sold items 2. Let's scope it to sheet 1, and then give a reference to the range. Now I can click on this arrow again, and I can click on OK. Let's check the name manager. Okay, so I have the sold items 2 range, and it is the same as the sold items range. However, it is scoped to sheet 1. Let's close this. And on sheet 1, let me just copy this formula. Or not copy, but type it again. So we have an average formula, and now I want to use this sold items 2 named range, and it works. Now let's do the same on sheet 2. So in cell A2, I will type the average function, and now I want it to refer to this, sold items. And actually you see that the range does not even appear here. This already confirms that the sold items 2 range is restricted to sheet 1. So I can only use it in formulas on sheet 1 in no other sheet of this workbook. But you know what? I will just type it manually. So I will say that, okay, I want the sold items 2 named range here, and I will receive a name error. We will talk about the name error later in the course. What is important is that we cannot use this named range on sheet 2, the sold items 2 name range, but we can use it on sheet 1 because it is scoped to sheet 1. Let's define a new range, but this time let's define the whole table as a range. So from cell A2 to cell D16. I pre-selected this range. Now I will go to define name and let's give it a name, our table. Actually, I can just make the O big. So our table. Okay, I will scope it to the workbook, and the reference is good because I have pre-selected the cells. Let's click on OK, and let's go to the name manager. Okay, I have the our table named range here, and let's go to filter, and let's click on define names. So this seems to be a defined name, but let's now filter for table names, and it disappeared. So although this is technically a table, Excel doesn't recognize it as a table. This range of cells is exactly what it is, a range of cells for Excel. While discussing the named ranges further, we will discuss what Excel recognizes as a table. But for now, this defined name, so this our table range, is good for us. Let me close this window, and let me just delete these two average formulas. Let's sum the sold items in cell E2. So I will just type sum. Good. Then I will choose the our table named range. So I will press tab. You see that it has this bluish purplish color and it shows us the whole range. And then I will just type a left parenthesis and then press enter. The result is 37,570. Now let's confirm this by typing a sum formula or function into cell C17. So let's sum it, but let's not use a range now. Let's just manually select the range. Actually, when I'm manually selecting the range, Excel automatically finds the named ranges. So because we have two named ranges that refer to the same range, so from cell C2 to cell 16, Excel automatically changed the range to the named range and actually even shows me that there are two names that refer to the same range. Now, that's fine. Let's use then the sold items range. And the result is the same. So Excel calculated the sum correctly, even in cell E2. This is because sum doesn't care if there are text values. Sum will only sum the numbers of the given named range. Now let me delete the formula from cell C17 and let me just quickly add a new row to the table. I will just copy Peter Smith and let's say that it should be Pamela Smith. Let's make this 1700 and APAC. Actually, let's make this 1730, so the sum value will be a nice round number. However, the sum value has not updated. Of course, it's expected because the sum function uses the our table named range, and that is the range from C2 to C16, as it is confirmed in the name manager. Now in the name manager we see A2 to D16, so the last row that is contained in this range is row 16. And this is why it matters that Excel does not consider this a table, but merely a named range.